Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Israeli government spokesman Eylon Levy. Thank you very much for joining us. First, an update, then your questions. We begin with an important update on the approximately 240 hostages in the Gaza Strip. I imagine that's why many of you have tuned in just now. In light of recent developments, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will convene the War Cabinet at 6 o'clock tonight, the Security Cabinet at 7 p.m. and a full session of the Government of Israel at 8 o'clock. Speaking today with IDF reservists at the Alexandroni Brigade, the Prime Minister said that on the matter of bringing home those hostages, we are making progress, and he hopes for good news soon. Now, an important point of procedure. Under Israeli law, to the extent that any deal involves a prisoner exchange, the families of victims of terrorists with blood on their hands in Israeli jails have a right to appeal to the Supreme Court against their release, and they would have 24 hours to do so. Now, since declaring war on Israel with the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired over 10,000 rockets at Israel, including sirens in Ashkelon just now. The death toll from the October 7th massacre stands at over 1,200. Unfortunately, that number is still being revised. We still have missing persons. We also have around 100 body bags of human remains in such horrific condition as to be unidentifiable 46 days on. Let's remember, Hamas burned alive many of its victims and mutilated and dismembered countless others. That's part of what is making it very difficult to come up with a definitive fatality list from the October 7th massacre. At least 8,188 Israelis have been injured since the war began. That is, of course, a conservative estimate. Today, the Hillel Yaffe Medical Center in Hadera, for example, reported a major increase in women in their 50s coming to the emergency room with heart attack symptoms caused by the stress of having children in the military. Many of them are reportedly suffering with Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. That's a clinical condition also known as broken heart syndrome, caused by the psychological stress slowing down heart muscle. Now, the IDF has notified the families of 390 soldiers that their loved ones have fallen in battle since the start of the massacre, as well as 59 members of the police forces. Now, as for the hospital above the Shifa terror complex, after a month of doubts and even denial, we're glad to see the media reporting on the literally concrete evidence of Hamas's command center under that hospital. And now that there is incontrovertible proof that Hamas, yes, used hospitals as military bases, we're demanding answers from the international community, including from the UN agencies that are still in denial and have not yet condemned Hamas's unlawful abuse of hospitals. Will you take action? And what action will you take to prevent this recurring in future? Or will you continue to ignore Hamas's modus operandi? Hospitals must be protected under international law, and we are demanding accountability from the bodies that continue to turn a blind eye and give cover to Hamas as it violates those protections. Now, it is day 46 that our nearly 240 hostages are in Hamas captivity, and as always, I want to draw attention to one of them. This is Eliakim Liebman. Today, 21st November, is his 24th birthday, and he's a hostage of Hamas. Eliakim Liebman was a private security guard at the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. When the massacre started, he called up his father for backup, and his father drove past rows of dead bodies by the side of the road. When he reached the massacre at the party, he saw a tent piled high with over 100 bodies. He searched the corpses for his son, but Eliakim was not there. For nearly 8 hours, he had rescued injured partygoers under fire before trying to escape himself. But then Eliakim saw the bodies of 2 women, and he and his friend Eitan Mo went to help. One of them was dead, the other was still breathing. They tried to hide her, they tried to save her, and they refused to save themselves. That was the last time they were seen. Hamas death squads brutally massacred at least 364 people at that party and abducted dozens into Gaza, including Eliakim. His brothers are now fighting in Gaza as IDF reservists. Whenever they move into new territory, they write him a message on a wall. We're coming. We will not leave our hostages in Gaza, and we will not leave their captors in power. Now moving on to several important operational updates, chock-a-block with operational updates today. First, the IDF continues its precise operations to dismantle the Hamas terror state and expose Hamas war crimes hiding under civilian areas. Today, we revealed IDF ground troops located an anti-tank missile under a baby's crib. This is after the tunnel shaft found under a child's bed, after the rockets under a girl's mattress, and after the declassified intercepted phone call between Islamic Jihad operatives moving anti-tank missiles in a stroller. A baby's crib. I think there is no clearer illustration of why we have spent over a month urging civilians to get out of the harm's way so that we can target the terror infrastructure Hamas has hidden beneath them. There will be nowhere for Hamas to hide in the Gaza Strip. And yesterday, IDF aircraft struck some 250 Hamas targets, including terrorists and rocket launchers. In Jabalia, the 162nd Division has been operating against terror infrastructure and operatives with aerial support from fighter jets and UAVs. During fighting, it took out 3 tunnel shafts where terrorists were hiding. The 401st and 551st Brigades have also been operating in the north to eliminate terrorists and their capabilities, capture their weapons, and destroy tunnel shafts. Meanwhile, in Zaytun, the 36th Division has been fighting the Hamas Zaytun Battalion, which had entrenched itself in a residential area, which, of course, we've been working for over a month to evacuate civilians from there. The 188th Brigade took operational control of several key targets there, including the Gaza City Brigade Hamas Command Center. The IDF has apprehended and interrogated over 300 terrorists who have yielded valuable information about the enemy's methods and unlawful attempts to blend among civilians for cover. They have also given us valuable new targets, including underground tunnels, warehouses, and weapons, and over 100 of those have already been struck. On the humanitarian front, an update from the IDF's efforts to get Gazan civilians out of harm's way. The IDF updated it has placed over 30,000 individual phone calls, sent over 10 million text messages, sent over 9 million voice messages, and distributed 4 million leaflets urging civilians to evacuate from areas of Hamas operations. Hamas is doing everything it can to maximize casualties, including on its own side. We're doing everything we can to minimize those casualties. The Jordanian field hospital that the Jordanians have been setting up in the Gaza Strip to treat the wounded is expected to be operational in the coming days. The United Arab Emirates has also introduced a team on the ground in Gaza to find a location for their own field hospital. We hope, of course, and demand that Hamas not abuse those field hospitals and use them as human shields, as it has been doing with the more permanent hospitals where we have already uncovered extensive terrorist infrastructure. 17 wounded children have left for medical care in the UAE. This is part of the 258 ill and wounded people who have left for treatment from the Gaza Strip in Egypt, the UAE, and Turkey. That brings us to the end of today's operational update. As always, your questions, please. If you have a question, please stick your hand up or type a question in the chat. Sure. Question from Jim Williams about the meeting of the government tonight. James, perhaps you missed the beginning of the update. The Prime Minister is going to convene the War Cabinet at 6 o'clock tonight. That's in just under an hour, 45 minutes time. The Security Cabinet is then scheduled to convene at 7 p.m. and a full session of the Government of Israel at 8 p.m. Of course, I can't go into any further details, but the Prime Minister says that on the question of our 240 hostages, we are hopeful for good news soon. A question from Yonko about the process that hostages may go through. Once we have information, we will update everything in an orderly manner. As we said, we still have those 3 government meetings to go through today. No, again, another question here from Shoshana about hostage exchange. I'll say this again, we can spare ourselves the questions. I cannot share any more information about what may be approved in order to release our hostages. We are, of course, demanding their immediate return. We hope to get them safe. We must remember, of course, that even when these hostages come home, it's not the end of the story for them. Especially the children will be severely traumatized. There are children there who are literally orphaned because Hamas murdered their parents in front of them. They've been in captivity for 46 days now with no access to the Red Cross, inhumane conditions. We don't know whether they've seen sunlight for the last 46 days. So there is going to be a very long road ahead, but let's get through these 3 important government sessions today. We're a democratic state. There are procedures and steps that have to be taken. Again, Coach, a question about the details of a hostage exchange deal. Again, I said I'm afraid there's nothing I can add beyond that. The War Cabinet is going to be meeting in 45 minutes, and if and when there is an approved deal, then we will of course update everything in an orderly fashion. Until then, we're not going to speculate, and really, human lives are at stake, and the less we say, the better. A question about whether the 100 unidentified bodies are included in the 1,200 casualties. I'm afraid we're at a stage where we don't know whether we're talking about complete bodies or simply parts of bodies. Hamas burned people alive, it dismembered them, and bodies were found across a very large area. We're going to continue updating the body count from the October 7th massacre, and of course these are numbers that are still in flux as we literally have to piece together the evidence of what happened on that horrific day. A question from the Canadian Broadcasting where there'll be a vote tonight about a full session of Parliament. Let me again restate, for those who missed it, the stages that we're going to have to move through. At 6 o'clock tonight, the War Cabinet will meet. At 7 o'clock, we will have the Security Cabinet, which is a broader forum than the more limited War Cabinet. After that, a full session of the Government of Israel at 8 o'clock. Families of victims of terrorists with blood on their hands who are sitting in Israeli jails, who would hypothetically be released in a prisoner exchange, to the extent that would be relevant, have a right to appeal to the Supreme Court against the release of the terrorists with their children's blood on their hands. They have 24 hours to do so. No such deal would require parliamentary approval. A question from Dr. A.B. Cobb. Will there be additional briefing after the Cabinet and government meetings? Not in a forum like this. This is a forum that we're doing once a day, normally 5 or 5:30 in the afternoon, but there will, of course, be orderly updates coming from the government as and when there is information that we can confirm. Sure. A question from Frank at CBS News, a question about battles in Nuseirat. Frank, I would direct your question to the IDF spokesperson's unit, please. That's an operational question, and the relevant information would come from military authorities. JNS, David Isaac, please. That's a very important question. As we said, we have two main goals in this war. The first is to totally destroy Hamas's governing and military capacities inside the Gaza Strip so that they can never pose a threat to our people again. And the second is to secure the safe return of our hostages. Those two objectives are going hand in hand. We hope to do everything we can in order to bring those hostages home, and we will continue to fight Hamas. This war will end with the total destruction of Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Okay, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much. Hopefully, as I said, we'll be able to deliver good news. Everyone is, of course, sick with worry and praying for the return of our hostages who've been held for far too long inside the Gaza Strip. Everyone have a good evening and keep safe. Thank you very much.